As Nick has so vividly shown us, navigating the world of youth audiences is complex, but it's dynamic, it's ever-changing, and it's absolutely necessary. I think, as you could see through the video, some of the statistics that got pushed up, like 2 billion kids under 18, and 20 billion in direct digital transactions. You just see how powerful, how important the audience is. So these broad trends need to be narrowed down into effective youth strategies. And today we're going to host a panel with some of those digital practitioners who are really great at doing so. So please join me in welcoming on stage our panel. Great, thank you. Vix, Chris, Sangita, why don't we sort of get this started by you guys introducing yourselves, and please cap it off with your childhood fandom.
Hi, I'm Vix. So I run the partnerships team at Publicis One, working very closely with Lego. Honestly, it's your dream job, creating experiences for some of these youth audiences we're talking about. My fandom was, I'm going to get this right, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Anyone else in the room? Hey, there we go. Fantastic. Pass it on to Chris.
Thank you. Chris Lewis, COO of Mediahub, currently exec sponsor across the Hasbro business that we have been working with since May, but also experience across the wider gaming space, also Activision, so other end of the spectrum. 20-month-old boy, so at the very start of thinking about the kind of content that he might start to see. I'm quite interested about him earning $1,000 a year. That's a good ambition to get him. Probably Transformers, maybe Thundercats. Kind of curious to see that Thundercats is coming back as a movie. Yeah. So that's a good one.
Hi, I'm Sangita, Business Director at Generation Media. The past 10 years, I've very much been focused on helping brands launch and connect with young audiences. So really kind of driving growth, I guess, in that side of things. In terms of fandom, I was absolutely obsessed with Barney the Purple Dinosaur. It was actually a nickname of mine, and my dad, to this day, still calls me Barney every now and then. But yeah, that's me.
Great. And Nick, you're not alone in your Warhammer fandom, but it's not me. It's my son, who would geek out with you at 10 years old, has gone really deep there. So let's start out with YouTube as a platform. I mean, still an incredible attention driver for youth and teen audiences, but really the limitations of that platform and the tools that they offer for targeting and safety really feel constricting. In fact, I'm going to get a little spicy on the panel. We have heard from some of our customers that Google would recommend to target unknown audiences, which just feels really cringeworthy. But Vix, we've been talking a lot about brand safety on YouTube main and the platform in general. Would love to hear, from you how you start to really reach the right audiences while still making sure that you aren't compromising brand value and safety for Lego.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point, actually, that Nick made, which was that these platforms are not built for purpose when we think about children. There is a lot of content on there. A lot of the content is made by creators. Creators aren't necessarily interested in things being kid safe, right? They're more interested in getting clicks and getting comments and getting followers. So as a result, some of it can be, to your word, spicy. I think it's really important for us. We see these statistics. We know these kids are on this platform. We're not talking about YouTube Kids when we're talking about these huge numbers of kids that are on YouTube. We are talking about YouTube main. So I argue that it's on the platform to do something about it, but it's certainly on us as brands to make sure that we vote with our feet and act and behave in the right way when we're on these platforms. There's things we can do. Obviously, massive shout out to SuperAwesome because I think what's really interesting is SuperAwesome's kid-safe approach to YouTube means that we can technically go on to some of this content which is relevant for these audiences, some of the kind of content that we kind of saw up on the stage, make sure that that content is actually relevant with AI matching as well as human moderation, and activate safely in those spaces. And I think that really has to be the route forward for any brand that actually cares about their kids' audience.
Yeah. Sangita, if I can go over to you too, because Gen Media has kids clients, but also teen clients as well. And so how do you feel that the tools on YouTube or the partners that you work with still do that same thing of help you be effective in targeting, but do protect safety?
I think I definitely agree with Vix. I think the responsibility is a shared responsibility, and it is down to kind of all of us in the room. I think what we really lean on is the research and insight side of things, and I'm sure that's one of the key reasons we're all here today, to kind of find out the latest and greatest and what our audiences are looking at. I think when it comes to research, we definitely need to have our finger on the pulse when it comes to the content needs and wants of our audiences. Young audiences and teen audiences are dynamic, and their interests are dynamic. And when I say dynamic, it's that change is fast, and their interests are really fluid. So a targeting strategy that's kind of evolving with that in real time, I think is super important. And I think the second thing I will say about this is to kind of all the brands and marketeers in the room, I think really focusing on that kind of attention metrics are really important. I think I'm not taking away from the fact that scale and reach on these platforms are really important, but the more we can understand how our audiences feel about the ads that we're showing them, I think the stronger our contextual strategies are going to be.
Excellent. Yeah, and in that strategy, we see a lot of AI being used as sort of a solve-all for really precise targeting. Chris, if I could kick it over to you, I think that there are still some challenges there around brand safety when you just rely on AI. So can you tell us a bit about your approach in handling that, harnessing that tool, but how you guys are thinking about showing up as safe as well?
Yeah, just that. I think you can't get away from the fact we're going to need to use AI to help us to do that. I think looking at the stat that was just shown was that 75% is long tail content, and you think about the speed with which new content is now going to be possible to create because of Gen AI, and as kids get to use that, it's going to be unmanageable to do it from a human level. So I think being really clear about the guardrails any AI is using for that brand filtering. I think to build on what Sangita was saying around the moderation, I think there's both the role at the media partners we're working with, but I also think on all agencies as well, is to take that time for curation around the placement. I'm going to give a terrible analogy, but for anyone who walked through Piccadilly Circus today and you see the brands on Piccadilly lights, and you think about, I think it's Augment Piquet, probably terribly pronounced, one of the most expensive watches in the world, and you see the brands it's sitting alongside, and that probably wasn't what they thought about when they were thinking about the context of that placement. So I think there's a human lens at the end. You can't do it for all the content, but the most important way you're getting most of those impressions served, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I know in our prep we were talking about some of the tests that you have been running. So have you seen consistent approaches in using AI from your different partners, or has it been a bit all over the map?
It's still very new, and as you were saying, we've run a trial across probably 6-7 different AI solutions, that are analysing videos, looking at audio, looking at transcripts, etc. I think the shift to using AI gives us reach, similar as you're saying, in the same challenges that we had in programmatic space with you can get cost-effective reach, very fast, but thinking about the quality, thinking about the engagement, thinking about attention, how that can be applied in this space is part of our selection process to narrow down the types of partners that we take going forward.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I mean, one of the striking stats is the fandom number of 75%, or 3/4 of kids have named a fandom that nobody else named, which is striking. So let me shift a little bit over to the creator economy, because a lot of that long tail are personal influencers and creators. So it brings up opportunity and a lot of challenge as well. But creators, influencers often used to sort of promote authenticity as well as for your brands. But really, what strategies do you all employ to help harness their brand, still land on the right content, but remain authentic to what you're trying to do?
I can start, yeah. I think, isn't it really interesting? I think we've probably all felt this at some point, particularly in your tween years. We've all wanted to be part of a tribe and part of a community. And I think this is where the creator economy is really doing this. As you say, like that huge number of fandoms that are so different. The fact that you can find a community online, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Discord and Reddit as well, other platforms that are rising, particularly with youth audiences, something to be thinking about for brands. I think the most important thing is to make sure that your brand values are aligned with the content creators that you're working with. Lego has quite a rigorous policy in terms of not only identifying content creators that are right for Lego as a brand, but also actually going into the depths of making sure that those content creators are, kind of their rights are protected as well. And I think that's really, really important, right? We're talking to kids, but potentially we're also using voices to talk to kids. It's important that we actually look at both sides of that and make sure that we're protecting both sides.
Yeah. The quote from the Hasbro CEO, Chris Cox, about sort of multi-generational IP as it moves along. Chris, how are you feeling about engaging creators and making sure that sort of along that journey, you're helping sort of represent Hasbro across different age groups?
Our focus is very much on the kid side of the Hasbro activity, and I think it's interesting as they bring product innovation to their portfolio, exactly as you saw the team there say, is then finding kind of new opportunities. So as their products become digitized, that gives us different creators to be able to work with that are more in tune with that product. I think the creator space is, typically I would say, thinking for other categories, long-term relationships with creators that become, partners. I think in this space, because those fandoms are so varied and they change, based on passions and trends, I think it's potentially more about those shorter term and just being able to find really quickly those relevant creators to be able to work with and partners that are able to activate quickly with those creators rather than, as I say, kind of long tenure type relationships, because I think they're less relevant in this space.
Yeah. Sangita, how do you think about in that super long tail the sort of brand of a creator versus just targeting the piece of content on YouTube from a creator?
I think it definitely is the qualitative aspect of it that's really interesting to me personally. I think young audiences have grown up with creators being a big part of their day-to-day, that they have found authentic connections with them and they're willing to build authentic new connections. And I think to Nick's presentation before, particularly for young audiences, that loyalty barometer is not as strong as the older age of the cohort. So I think when it comes to connecting with young audiences, it really is very much about, I know back to what I said before, but understanding what it is that they're interested in that current moment, because that loyalty isn't necessarily there. They haven't built that affinity yet. So it's kind of in that process of, balancing reaching them, but also engaging them to want to kind of find out more.
I actually had a follow-up on that. I think it's potentially dangerous to skip from kids from trend to trend. I think, like Nick said about Doom, he is still going to go back and see the latest Doom as it releases. Ethan Gamer started streaming content when he was about 5 or 6. He still has a huge amount of an audience that grew up with him. So I would actually caution against kind of jumping beyond, kind of moving around beyond fandoms and actually changing it up a little bit too much.
Yeah, definitely like that. Let's think about that creator ecosystem and broaden it a little bit and get over to immersive gaming, where game developers can be seen a lot as creators as well. I know Generation Media has leaned quite a bit into immersive gaming platforms, but are there lessons that you all build and take into immersive gaming environments from creator influencers? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think there are definitely transferable lessons that we can take from kind of content-led platforms into gaming. So when we talk about Roblox, Fortnite, these are very much immersive gaming experiences where the individuals or profiles operating on that, they're not just content creators, they're more community builders. And it's all about that building an experience versus kind of just touching base, I suppose. When it comes to kind of younger audiences, I think there's maybe a less of a like-for-like comparison, because when it comes to YouTube content made for kids, the comment sections are turned off. So in terms of that social interaction, it's fairly limited. If we're talking about older audiences, there's potentially more scope there. So perhaps kind of leaning onto learnings from other social platforms like TikTok might also help kind of elevate that social interaction in these immersive gaming environments.
Yeah, that's really insightful. As you think about gaming, Chris, immersive gaming environments, how do you think about sort of long-term investment there versus a transactional? Because you can reach and find kids, youth audiences, teens in those spaces. But as you've been thinking about your strategy for Hasbro in those environments, how do you think about that real long-term investment?
I think there's a balance between kind of campaign support and where the content creators are actually building those relationships directly. I think, to heavily and properly integrate into any of those platforms is, quite a sizable investment. And so I think the partnership with brands is critical at that point. I think there's still a role from more of a campaign perspective of seeing, how those platforms and the wider ecosystems work. I see, from both previous experience on Twitch, but just thinking about gaming today is how people are bouncing between, playing the games, live streaming, playing the games, taking snippets of playing games and putting that onto YouTube, then putting it onto other social platforms. So I don't think any of this is about thinking about a single destination. So even the investments that are made in working with a platform like a Roblox is to create content that can then be used elsewhere, build a community, send that community back to Roblox, and then continue that journey. Yeah,
brilliant. Yeah, we talk a lot about that sort of cross-channel, cross-platform view of audiences and sort of an audience-based view. So is that how you're thinking about targeting effectively youth audiences? And I guess as we sort of wind down here, I'd love to hear from you all on what you hope to be built, or sort of negatively what you think is missing, but perhaps some optimism as well. Vix, why don't we start with you?
Gosh, what do I hope to be built? I hope a safer world for our kids. No, I think the important thing is actually platforms are now starting to respond to some of the pressure that's been put on them to make the places safer. You cannot stop children from going to places, but you can make it safer. And I don't think it's the case anymore that they can kind of say, well, we don't have a duty of care. It's kind of on the parents to sort it out. I think we all have a responsibility. As we do as brands, so do they. So I hope to see them implement better measures. Roblox is kind of starting off with obviously changing the chat functionality for under 13s. I would like to see more in that direction. But I would also like to see them championing positive experiences, right? I would like to see these platforms, kind of positively putting these experiences to the top of native kind of find a new game kind of engines and things like that. I would like to see us championing the positive experiences, whether it's in Roblox, metaverses, and also creators as well.
Yeah, and Chris, just that you so well explain that real sort of cross-channel view. How about you, as you've gotten ramped up here in the youth space with Hasbro? What do you feel like should be out there for effective strategies for you?
I think putting a media planner hat on, there's so much we don't know about how these groups and this age group is consuming media and where they're spending their time. There are lots and lots of tools and studies that many of the people in this room will be using for adult audiences, but there's a big vacuum for data about the kids space and understanding, and some of that is also cultural. Do people consume lots of content before going to school? What does the weekend look like? How prevalent is the use of mobile devices, in different markets? How does that change for each age group? So being able to get more intelligence there ultimately means our job is finding the right place to reach someone in the right ecosystem, where it's going to get the outcome of the campaign. And at the moment, there's still a vacuum of being able to guide that planning work.
Yeah, wonderful. Sangita?
I think a couple of things for me. So the brand safety thing, absolutely. I think AI, to Nick's point before, in terms of being such a powerful tool to really kind of drive that efficiency of the safety parameters, I think is doing wonders at the moment. Obviously, it's never going to be a perfect scenario because that target, I think, is continuously moving. So in terms of it ever being fully safe, that's to be kind of played for. But I think it's very much a tag team approach between kind of everyone here in the room, our audiences, parents, right down to kind of people in the community like teachers, educating children about how to operate in this online ecosystem safely. I think if that education piece is there, and it starts from kind of the grassroots level almost, from kind of kids, I think it will have a knock-on effect on everything that we're doing.
Wonderful. Yeah, and just to sort of wrap it, these types of conversations and meetings that we have with our brand and agency partners really do help inform us and fuel our own innovation. So could you please give a round of applause to everybody who's giving their wonderful viewpoints. And just to segue here, SuperAwesome takes all of this wonderful information and creates innovation and builds new products. And so next up, I have the privilege of introducing our CTO, Leo. And Leo is going to take us through quite a bit of what we've been working on in the background. So thanks again. Thanks for being on stage.